In today's world of increasingly cheap USB hubs and accessories, there are some interesting situations you can get yourself into that require some more unique and robust solutions. I've worked in more than a handful of control rooms and booths that could have made use of a tool like this. The ATEN 3344i is an industrial quality, remote controlled USB 3 switch. It is USB 3.1 Generation 1, so 5 gigabits per second data transfer versus Generation 2's 10 gigabit per second rates. I wouldn't call this a KVM unless you're using one of the handful of USB 3 displays on the market currently, as it doesn't handle video for most users. While USB 3.1 is common on the USB-C type connector, it does not support DisplayPort or Thunderbolt 3 graphics, which are also common uses for USB-C these days. What it is designed for is connecting high-cost peripherals and hardware to multiple workstations, rather than duplicating expensive gear that may only be accessed occasionally at any given workstation. This type of switch not only allows manual switching between destinations, but accepts RS-422 and RS-485 serial input commands, so you could automate any number of these units in tandem to reconfigure an entire lab or control room remotely via a switching system like a Crestron system, or something more affordable like one of the many ultra-portable development computers like a Raspberry Pi. I think it is important to point out that this unit is not a matrix. Although there are 4 inputs, those are essentially a single bus that is switched between 4 destination machines. You can expand the inputs with traditional hubs to accommodate any number of devices, or even add more of these units for more complex remote switching. Included in the box are the switch itself and then this bag of goodies here. So let me dump out some of what we've got. So we have 4 USB 3.1 cables. They give you 2 1.2 meter USB 3.1 Gen 1 B2A cables and 2 of the same in 1.8 meters. And those are for connecting to the host machines. You also get a simple push button switch for local manual control and a few Euroblock connectors for serial input and power. And this rack mount plate here, which is a really welcome addition to any small accessory like this. Far too often with small utility devices, it's really easy to take for granted how difficult it can be to mount and how unwieldy things can become once everything is all wired up. That might be my only real complaint for this unit, and that is that the I/O is on opposing sides. I do like it this way for desktop use, so I can access the USB 3.1 inputs easily, but for putting this in a rack or mounting it otherwise, having inputs and outputs coming from opposing sides on such a small unit, and these are such heavy-duty USB 3 cables, can be a little bit cumbersome. Being an industrial unit, they're also assuming that you're going to be doing some DC power distribution in your racks already, so no power supply is included in the box. There is a standard DC input jack, center positive and labeled for 12 volts, but I've used the Euroblock input for my testing, and the unit seems perfectly happy if you can supply something between 9 and 24 volts DC. I had this 12 volt 4 amp supply on hand, which is pretty similar to the other more beefy powered USB 3 hubs that I have. Now, it's worth noting that you can connect both power inputs at once, and the unit will prioritize the input jack and fail over to the Euroblock, where you could potentially have a battery connected. So what can you plug into this? Well, pretty much anything you would plug into any other USB 3 hub. If you're thinking of asking me if it will work with your specific piece of gear, I'll save you the trouble and tell you right now that I probably didn't test whatever gear you own in this brief first look, but in my testing, it was exactly the same experience as running through any other USB 3.1 hub. Interfaces, controllers, hard drives, all work fine. It should be obvious, but it's worth mentioning that you still have to treat your hardware properly. If you don't eject these disks before hitting this selector switch, you're going to have a bad experience, and I'll show you that now. So right now I've got 2 disks mounted through this switch, the 1 terabyte backup drive at the top you see there, and then also this store and go drive right there. So if I pick up this switch and hit it without ejecting those properly, you will see not happy. Now those have mounted over onto my Windows computer right now, and you can see that connected up here to port number 2, going through that longer USB 3 cable over to a Windows laptop over there. That will mount just fine, and if I cycle through, so here we go again, I'm going to click through, there's 3, 4, there's nothing connected to the 3 or 4, so now let's remount them to number 1 and see what happens. And you see them just repopulate right there, the 1 terabyte and the store and go. So up to you as to how often you want to go through that. So I don't think I would use a switch like this with media or hard drives like this outside of a very specific use case, and almost certainly not with RS422 or 485 remote control happening somewhere at a distance from the computers, without taking into consideration that we need to eject those. If you can take that into consideration and you can work that into your process of switching, then this will work just fine with hard drives. It works just like any other USB 3 hub, and as long as you treat your mounted devices properly, it should perform just like any other hub. And in my testing, I was switching hard drives between OS X Catalina and Windows 10 with absolutely no issues. So all in, you're looking at just under $200 for the 3344i. It is compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux. It supports the amazing and somewhat rare USB M2 locking USB 3 cables if you're worried about connections being secured over time in an installation or in a moving rack that gets transported a lot. It includes overcurrent protection for USB battery devices being charged, and you can see on the front here, output amperages 1.5 amp on these 3, and then 0.9, just under 1 amp on the 4th input. I'm not really sure why they've done that specifically, and they're not all just 1.5, but that is what they've listed. And for my brief time with the unit, it is the same quality that I've kind of come to get to know from all of the ATEN products I've looked at here in the shop. It is very well built. They assume that you are going to install them into industrial applications like it says, so they provide things like redundant power options and locking connectors. So that's it for the US3344i Industrial 4-into-1x4 USB 3.1 Generation 1 5 gigabit per second hub switch. If you need it, you'll know it, and I'd love to hear from anyone using a switch like this in their setup, studio, control room, or lab, so reach out and let me know if you're doing that. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Visit DcSoundOp.com for more information on everything we cover here on the channel. Links in the description below for everything you've seen in this video. I'll see you next time.